Hi, I'm Glenn Butner, Associate Professor of Theology at Gordon-Conwell. One of the things that I like to teach and study involve theological puzzles because I think these are really helpful in our understanding how one Christian doctrine or belief connects with another. Beyond that, these help us to understand the complexity of our infinite perfect God. This means I spend a lot of time looking at the doctrine of the Trinity or Christology, but recently it also means I'm spending more and more time in the doctrine of original sin, which is an increasingly complicated theological debate that a lot of people in the contemporary church are unaware of. Of course, the doctrine of original sin says that because of Adam and Eve, you and I are affected by the fall, such that we inevitably sin and have an inherent inclination towards sin. And this has for a long time been a point of debate, largely for exegetical reasons. For example, Romans 5:12 through 19, which is something of the locus classicus for the doctrine of original sin, has a lot of textual ambiguities. Consider verse 12, where Paul begins, "Since through one man sin entered the world," and he kind of trails off. You would expect that because of the since, or some translations have because of the just as, that there would be a so also, and yet we never actually see that in the text. Verse 13 is a tangent. Paul never returns to his thought, and then later on gets back on track looking at his argument from a new angle. This ambiguity has led to a lot of different theories about why we sin and how we are connected to Adam's sin. Two of the most notable ones being natural headship. That's something in my nature, which was received by biological descent from Adam, inclines me towards sin. Or federal headship, which says that Adam was a representative for me in a covenant, and since he sinned, I am viewed as guilty, and perhaps God has removed something of an original righteousness, so that now I am unable to be clean from sin. Whatever way we resolve the text, the debate has been even more complicated in modern times by several issues. I'll name two briefly here. One targets Augustine of Hippo, the historical theologian that played a major role in developing this doctrine in the West. And that critique comes from much feminist theology, which is concerned about how Augustine linked the transmission of original sin with sex. You see, Augustine thought sex was inherently evil, and so any of us who came to be through sexual reproduction, which until in vitro fertilization was all of us, must be viewed as stained by sin. The concern is that since women were traditionally associated more with reproduction, that they would then be associated more with sin and temptation and evil, a valid concern if we look at the history of Christian thought. A second contemporary concern comes from the sciences, where many contemporary theories suggest that we are not descended from a single pair of humans, but actually from a smaller community, which has resulted in something of a cottage industry of theologians considering which interpretations of Romans 5 might fit that science. Now, I don't have time to resolve these debates today, but I can suggest that the way we answer these contemporary challenges and exegetical questions will shape the entirety of our systematic theology. First, by implicating our theology of Scripture, as we wrestle with, do we ground our theology in the inspired Word or in the theological and ethical responses to contemporary challenges? Second, in our doctrine of God, since the doctrine of original sin tries to explain how humans and not God are responsible for evil. And third, in the doctrine of Christ, since the universality of sin from original sin ensures that we need Jesus as our only way to the Father. If you're interested in trying to understand the complications of all of these debates and to develop your own understanding of how to fit all of these pieces together, take my class, Sin and Evil, on campus at Hamilton or with many of our digital or remote options.